Hello, Garland Nixon here, and RFK Jr. He's running for president in a pit of vipers. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and as you know, I've been busy. Man, I had a lot of fun last night doing that show with Andre Martianoff and Scott Ritter. That was a blast. Hope you got to check that out. But let us talk. Oh wow, Pacheco, no, Pacheco Rain. I got all wrong. Whatever. Got all kind of interesting name. Pacheco. What's happening? All right. And Ben says blah blah. You know, I wonder. I should just do a video and just say that the whole time. Blah 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. Kind of like the old Charlie Brown, where the teacher would just go walk, 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 walk. They could do a whole video like that. At any rate, let us talk. Well, RFK Jr. is running into some bumps in the road, and let's talk about why. Before we get to the DNC, let's talk about my friends and comrades and buddies and ideologically aligned folks who are mad at him over things that he said about Israel, blah blah blah. Why is that? Before we get to the DNC, here's the problem. And you might have heard this saying before: a cat that stops on a hot stove will never step on another one, nor will he step on a cold stove. And forgive me if I misgendered the cat. But at any rate, you get my point. You get my point. I mean, these days, hey, you misgender. What do you mean he? You're misgendering the darn cat, Garland. You transphobe or something. I don't know. Catphobe, I guess that'd be it. Anyway, so pussyphobe, I don't know what you call it. I like cats. I like animals. But at any rate, on I go. I digress. Here's what has happened. You have a lot of people right now in the U.S. that are lefties. There are people like me, a huge contingent of people like me, right? And these are people who were Democrats for years, right? And they were blind. I was once blind, but now I see, right? And they thought, okay, I'm a member of this party. I'm part of this party, and the Republicans are evil, and we're trying to do the right thing. Didn't realize just how bad the situation was. But in 2016, my story is the same as a lot of people. And there's a lot of people with this story. We believed in Bernie, and Bernie said things. He said some anti-imperialist things, not a lot, but he said some. And we hadn't heard anybody saying it before, but Obama didn't say it. He just told us hope and whatever change, right? So we heard Bernie. We looked at parts of Bernie's history, and we said, you know, Bernie has always stood up for the right thing. He really has a good history of standing up for the right thing. But we didn't look at the second part of that, and that is, and as I always say, I'm going somewhere with this relative to RFK. This is a critical discussion when you're talking about RFK. Bernie, it's critical that you talk about Bernie, I think, and Tulsi Gabbard both. So Bernie, but there was another part of Bernie that we missed out on. And take the 90s. When Bill Clinton was in office. And what Bernie did was he pushed back against NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, right? Pushed back against it for all he was worth. He correctly predicted what it would do. He took the right position. Excuse me. And he pushed for the right thing. And then after Clinton pushed it through, when a couple of years later, Clinton runs in 96 and Bernie comes out and he says, we gotta support Bill Clinton. Unacceptable if you vote for somebody else, right? You know, Bernie. So even though they screwed him and they lied and they screwed the American people and they dismissed him, he came out and supported him anyway. And at that point, they knew who Bernie was. They knew he was going to take the right position. He was going to be a bit of a burr under their saddle in some ways, and he was useful in other ways. He was a burr under their saddle in that when they were trying to push things through, he was going to tell people the truth about him. Well, that's unfortunate, but he was a benefit in another way, because what he was going to do within the dynamic of the Democratic Party is he was always going to go with the argument that we've got two parties, even though he was ostensibly independent. He was going to go with, there's two parties, you got to pick one. The Republicans are evil, the Democrats are better. Every 4 years he was going to say, oh, I know the Democrats got problems, but the Republicans are so bad, you got to put a Democrat in, no matter if the Democrats ran, whoever they ran. If they ran, the most evil person in the universe, he was going to say, you've got to vote for this person. And in fact, he did, because that would be Hillary. That was an apt description of Hillary Clinton. You're going to have to vote for Hillary, hold your breath and vote for her because Trump is so bad, right? So what happened was people watched this guy and they said, he's telling the truth. He really believes in this. And they also thought that once he gets done with this thing, if they screw him, he's going to do the right thing. He's not going to buy into that. He's not going to fall in line and say, vote for this person, especially after he spent the entire primaries telling us how bad Hillary was. And he was right. He's not going to come in then and say, vote for her. Well, he did. And if we'd looked at his history at the time, we'd have known it ain't the first time Bernie did that. So that's who Bernie is. I'm not here to judge Bernie, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just simply here to state the facts. And that's the facts. So what happened was you got a lot of people who left the Democrat, like me, and said, you got to be freaking kidding me. I've been had by Bernie. Bernie didn't had me. I had myself by not accurately looking at his record and by being naive. Again, this is a big part of the dynamic and the hurdle that RFK Jr., one of the hurdles that RFK Jr. is facing. So we got burned. We stepped on a hot stove. That hot stove was believing that Bernie was actually against the system. Bernie would rail against the system, but ultimately he'd come back and say, you got to support the system. And we're even seeing it now. What's going on? Hey, we got to start World War III and blow everybody up in a nuclear bomb. Well, we got to do that, according to Bernie, because Putin's evil. Anything the Democratic Party says, Bernie's on line with it, right? So bottom line is, we look at that and people are like, Bernie is what we eventually thought he was. He's a member of the Democratic. What difference does it make if he's an independent or a member of the Democratic Party? He's a de facto member of the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party sees him as a leader. They see him as a person who can marshal this kind of unruly lefty force that they have and convince them that there's still a place for them in the Democratic Party, even though there isn't. Right? They even gave him like some unofficial title in the Senate, like outreach idiot or something like that. Hey, Bernie, your job is to go out and tell the naive schmucks to come vote for us, even though we hate their guts and we're not going to give them anything they ask for. We're all for World War III. We're corporate stooges and warmongers. And Bernie's like, sure, thanks a lot. I'll take that position. So what happened? We got burnt and we're like, oh my God. And then Tulsi Gabbard comes out and she runs. Now, I believe, I may be mistaken, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that people who were running were kind of squeezed into making a promise that even if they lost, they would still endorse Biden. Tulsi lost, she endorsed Biden. And a lot of us were like, oh my God, you would endorse this friggin' neocon ghoul, and look at the results. So even though I like Tulsi Gabbard, I don't dislike Bernie. It doesn't matter. To me, it's not about liking or disliking a person. Even though I liked Tulsi Gabbard, and if I was a choice between Tulsi Gabbard and any of the big time corporate stooges, I'd pick Tulsi Gabbard because she'd be far better than the big time corporate stooges. I still have not forgotten that, ultimately, they robbed her, and she did what Bernie did. After she was robbed, she endorsed the warmongering corporate stooge that robbed her. So I haven't forgotten those things. And guess what? Neither has anybody. So now RFK comes in facing that dynamic. The day RFK said, I'm running, there were people like me, not me, but people like me who looked at it and said, I don't trust you, RFK. I've been had too many times, right? I've been snookered too many times. That has nothing to do with RFK Jr. I remember one time, I go back to my younger dating years and stuff like that, right? And I remember I was like 22, and I dated this girl, and we went out and we were dating for a while. And the woman said to me, well, Garland, I hope you never turn gay and leave me for a guy. And I'm like, what the hell? Me? You got the wrong man, lady. Where the hell did that come from? And she said, well, I had a boyfriend, and at some point I found out he was gay, and he left me for a guy. So it had nothing to do with me. I started thinking to myself, did I do something? Was the clothes I have on a picture? What the hell am I doing to imply to her that and I'm like, I was like, thought about it for a week before I asked her. And then finally I'm like, what the hell did I do something? Was it something as the album that Richard Pryor put out years ago? Is it something I said? Where'd that come from? And what I found out was it didn't come from me. It had nothing to do with me. It happened to her before. She got burned. And now she's looking at me like, hey, are you going to do that too? Right. And that's what human beings do. We look for patterns. Our brains work that way. That is what our so-called consciousness is. We're looking for patterns of danger, patterns that could imply danger. That's what this consciousness does. First and foremost, looks for patterns. And unfortunately for a lot of us, for the humans, because we're looking for patterns, we find patterns even where there ain't patterns. And if we run into something that happens one time or two times or three times, we then suspect that that pattern will repeat itself over and over and over. It's just the way the brain works, unfortunately, for RFK Jr. So now you have people who are going to look at him because they got burned in the past, and the day they meet him, they're thinking to themselves, he's going to turn gay and leave me for a guy, if they're a woman, if you get my point of what I'm saying. They're thinking to him that same thing. They're thinking, hey, you know, he's going to do what Bernie did. I heard people say it. It was obvious. I've heard people say, yeah, he's just going to do what Bernie did. And what is that? He's going to get robbed. Yeah, I'll give you that. And then he's going to endorse Biden anyway. And I'm like, well, I don't know that he's going to do that. However, I'll say this. We cannot predict such things simply because of something that happened in the past, but with another person at another time. But it is reasonable to assume that many people who have been burned will think that way. Is it a logical way to think? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it is logical to think that people who have been through that type of thing, that type of trauma, I will call it political trauma, it is reasonable to think that people who have been through that kind of political drama will expect it to come again. Right? So before we even get to the DNC, I'm hitting on some of the problems that RFK Jr. is going to have. Number one, a lot of people that are going to support him have been burned, and they're going to expect him. They're going to have an expectation that he'll burn them. You have people who their father was abusive. There's a girl, her father was abusive, and every guy she meets, she sees her father. And she expects the guy to do what her father did. And she destroys every relationship. And she meets the nicest guy in the world that he thinks the world. And he just loves the ground she walks on. And he crawls at her feet. What can hear? Roses every day, you name it. But she's got dad in here. And every time she looks at him, little does she know, there's dad. And she sabotages and destroys that relationship. Other people, it was mom. Other people, it was the priest. I don't know. We don't want to go there. But you get my point. It is not unusual for people to relive trauma through the dynamics of future relationships. So it is nothing uncommon. It is something that's reasonable to expect that there's going to be people who've been stinking burned so bad. It saw the second they saw RFK Jr. before they heard a word, especially when they heard the good stuff, when RFK Jr. said, man, we got to end these wars. The CIA's up to no good. The FBI's raising hell. What's up with the media anyway? And don't even start me on COVID. People are like, holy crowley, sweet Mary, mother of God. I like that guy. Dad, I knew it. It's Bernie Sanders, my abusive dad. I'm looking at him. As soon as they saw this guy, they saw their abusive dad, which would be Bernie Sanders in this particular scenario. Right? So I literally heard it out of people's mouths within days after he announced that said, he's just going to do like my daddy did. He's just going to beat me like daddy did. Why? He'll get me to love him and then he'll leave me, just like everybody always does. You know what I'm talking about. So they had that daddy thing going on. They had that Bernie, Tulsi, whoever thing going on with him, and he couldn't possibly win. Think about it. If you meet someone and you're like, hey, I think you're nice. Can we? And you're thinking, well, this is the person, you're 22 years old and you're thinking, hey, I'll marry this person and have 3.5 children and a minivan. Hey, I'll have a white picket fence. I'll have all kinds of things that people have. We're moving forward. She'll be a soccer mom. I'll be a soccer dad, whatever, right? You're seeing all of that at age 22. And she looks at you and says, you're going to beat me just like my daddy did. Run like hell. You don't have a chance. No matter what you do, it's going to be sabotaged because you're being viewed. See this? Take these glasses and paint a picture of daddy on them. And she's looking through them and she don't see you. She says, daddy, take a picture of and instead of RFK, paint a picture of Bernie and Tulsi on it. Because there's a whole lot of people that they look through there and they're like, he's going to do it to me again. Not again. I can't take it one more time. I had hope. No more hope. I can't take that kind of letdown again. No! Back, I say, you evil one. Because I don't want to get burned again. That's a rough dynamic for him. And it's this. It's trying to run in a system that is so filthy, that's so rotten, that's so corrupt from top to bottom, that when you stick your foot in that system, people smell the sewage that's already there, right? You're going to go into this sewage, this pit of vipers, and say, I'm going to clean things up. People smell the sewage as soon as they see you, even if you ain't got any on you. And that's him. So now tell me, let me know in the chat if I'm getting too deep in these metaphors, but I tend to do that. That's who I am. You got people looking at him there are people who felt a rush of relief. Oh God, finally somebody's saying the things that need to be said, right? Now, there were those who felt, well, yeah, he's saying great things and all, but now let's go this part. And this is again, a problem for him. But let's be honest about this. They're going to rob him. And that's my feeling. My feeling is, how do you run a Democratic Party if you're doing the right thing? How do you run in the Democratic Party if you're doing the right thing? Now, I don't fault him for running in the same way I don't say, oh, Bernie shouldn't have run. He's Bernie Sanders. Would you look at a bird flying by and say that bird shouldn't fly? It is the nature of birds to fly. So let's not try to pretend that a bird should do something other than fly. Hey, how come that bird's not swimming around like a minnow? Because he's a bird. If he was swimming around, he'd probably be a fish. He might be a seagull or a duck. But right now, he's a bird and he's flying. You look at Bernie, look at RFK. Well, they should do something different. No, they shouldn't. They should do exactly what they're doing because that is what their nature is to do. That's who they are. That's what they do. It's like saying, well, Garland, I don't think you should be doing a YouTube show. What should I be doing? You should be curling. Yeah, there you go. What do you think of curling? No, I should be doing a YouTube show. It's my nature. I've had people say to me, I literally had somebody argue with me one time. They said, look, Garland, you got to get into MMT. Well, let me tell you something. My sister is an accountant, a very successful accountant, I might add. Very successful accountant, right? Accountant. And you can see her sometime, you'll be talking, oh, blah, blah, blah. And you just start talking about numbers. And, it's like, I don't know. Should I do this? Should I pay this off? She takes out a calculator and you can't see her fingers move. Well, no, you shouldn't do that, Garland. And she'll proceed to explain to me why I shouldn't do it and what the numbers or percentages are. My eyes roll around in my head. And after a while, I'm like, okay, I just won't do that. I don't understand why, but this is far too complicated for me, but I ain't going to do it. I'll do this because you're the accountant and I ain't, right? It's like if you have a family member that's a lawyer or a mechanic or something, you may not understand what they're telling you, but you go along with it because they're your family member and you feel like they're giving them good advice, right? Be like saying, Garland, you should be an accountant. I hate math. No, it'd be like saying she should do something else. She loves math. Let's see, what is it? Before she was accountant, the first 2 years she went to school for chemical engineering. She likes that kind of stuff. I hate that kind of stuff. I'm an artsy, what's the word? I guess I'm kind of a, artsy is not the word, creative person. So that wouldn't have been me. It'd be like asking me to do that and her to do this. That ain't going to happen, is it? Asking RFK to do something a different way, to run independent. No, that ain't who he is. This is the perfect place for him to run. He shouldn't do it any other way. Now, let's get back to his problems. He's doing what he should do. He's doing the right thing, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not. The universe says he's doing the right thing. This is what he has to do, and this is what he's doing. He's carrying out what he needs to carry out. Get off his back, I gotta say. But at any rate, for those of you who are saying he should do something else, I'll joke. Of course, as you know, I'm always joking. At any rate, so now the issue being, how do you convince people that have been burned? Well, I don't know. Don't ask me. I ain't RFK Jr. I ain't running for president. Even although somewhere around here I've got a hat that says Nixon 2024. Maybe I should. But at any rate, I ain't. So I don't have to figure that out. But what I'm pointing out is that's a high hurdle. You got a lot of people that should support you that have been burned so bad, they're scared to support anybody. They've been beaten and abused by daddy so bad that they're afraid to date anybody because anybody they date is daddy. Ooh, how do you get over that one, right? All right, let's continue to move. So next, let's go inside of the DNC. Right. And now, don't get me wrong, he has some great advantages outside of that. Why is that? Because he's very appealing to Republicans and independents. He's very appealing to people outside of the DNC, right? Because the Democratic Party is a cult. Now, I believe both parties are cults, but they're different brands of cults. They're different styles of cult, right? And the Democratic Party now is an interesting cult, but let's not get too carried away in evaluating the types of cults the two parties are. But the Republican Party right now, in some ways, it seems to me there are some ways that the Republican Party is more open to discussion and critical thinking. There are other ways where it absolutely ain't, where it's absolutely every bit of a bunch of ideologue people who see their party and their beliefs almost as a religion, in the same way that the Democratic Party is. That's why I call it a cult. But there are ways, there are areas where the Republican Party right now is more open for critical evaluation than the Democratic Party. And here's what I say: you can't be less open for critical evaluation than the Democratic Party and critical thinking, because the door is slammed shut. Ain't none of that. You come in there and you say, perhaps we should discuss something, present facts. Oh, get out of here. The Democratic Party right now, and again, like I said, a big part of the Republican Party is the same, but the Democratic Party, and I will thank Tucker Carlson for reminding me of the word tautology, right? And that is the foundation of a big part of the Democratic Party right now. And it's simply this: I'm going to say something is true, and therefore it's true. If you say it, and you say it a few times, and everybody comes to a consensus, you just keep saying it, and we believe it because we say it. There's things about the Republican Party that's exactly the same, but there is a window in the Republican Party that doesn't exist right now in the Democratic Party for critical thinking. Okay. And there's, as I said, areas where ain't no hope for critical thinking, but there's a window for critical thinking. And so you got a lot of Republicans that are looking at JFK Jr. and say, look, man, yes, I got some things I really don't like, and some things the Democrats say that I really do not abide by. But there's some big things going on here, and I'm willing to say these things are not deal breakers. So I'll vote for him. So the truth is, I believe if he ran, he could get enough Republican votes. If he, in a Democratic nation, which this is not, he could get enough Republican votes to win. He could get, because here's a guy, isn't it funny that the Democrats say, yes, what we want to do is cross over and get Republican votes. And they got a guy. Tulsi Gabbard could have did it. He could do it. You got a guy that can cross over and get votes from both sides. But that's not, the Democratic Party said that ain't really what they meant. Theirs was one of kind of a class-based, kind of the ruling elite and those who go along with the narratives that are posed by the ruling elite. That's the coalition they wanted. Because politics are about a coalition, right? His coalition would be something totally different. It'd be people that wanted, oddly enough, a very revolutionary change. It'll be people who were tired of the system and the corruption and the lies and the treachery, and that wanted at least some kind of a foundational situation where they understood where they were getting. So he could get a lot of Republicans and independents and libertarians and people that just had it with the system, right? And in fact, there are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of people like me that say this about RFK Jr. You ain't gonna convince me that this guy is just some pawn and puppet for the system after COVID. You ain't gonna convince me that, because that was something that you couldn't touch. That was the thirdest of third rails. Forget it. Forget it. And everybody went along with every narrative and premise that they were given. And whether you agree with him or not on things, I'll say this: he used critical thinking when it came to COVID. People say, "Oh, he did this or that, or he said things that I don't like." And here's always been my retort, shall we say? Okay, fine. Say what you want about RFK. You don't like what he said about. Here's what I'd like you to do. Specifically, tell me what it is that RFK Jr. said that was false, that was incorrect, that was problematic, that wasn't well researched, that wasn't aligned with data and facts. Show me something that there's no empirical evidence for. Show me something that he said, a position that he took, an argument that he made that you can take apart. And if you can do that, please do it. Because as I always say, I don't want to be right. I want to be correct. And RFK Jr. said the same thing. Hey, man, you can call me every kind of anti-vaxxer you want, but please, but that's just, again, that's tautology. If I call you a name because I called you that name multiple times, that means it's true. Well, hey, well, he's some kind of anti-vaxxer. My question is this: whatever you call him is fine. Present me some evidence, and I'm willing to look at it. But part of the world is you are what your record says you are. So again, I didn't look at Bernie type close enough. Well, I'm looking at RFK Jr. a little closer, and I'm saying, look, here's a guy, man. I mean, he took positions that were unacceptable everywhere. There were so many people that had questions that were scared to death to ask questions, and he just said, "This is who I am. This is what I got to say." He had and this is not a pro or negative RFK thing. I'm telling you how I feel. I'm telling you what I think. Take with it what you take from it, what you may. Here's a guy who basically took the position that I don't care what the, what I was going to say is, for years, he sued big corporations. He did a lot of environmental lawsuits. He went after big corporations. And when the whole COVID narrative started, it appears to me, based on what he said, based on what he said, that his skepticism was based on his distrust for big corporations. It wasn't about COVID. It was about his distrust of major corporations and their involvement in the COVID narrative. That was, again, it was critical thinking. It was logical, and it was consistent with his positions against major corporations for years. So he didn't say, well, I ain't going to say that because that'll make me look bad. I'm not going to say that because I'll lose access. I won't going to say that because this and that. No, he didn't. He took the position, a very, very controversial position. It shouldn't have been. Simply, the positions that he took should have been confronted with empirical data. And that's fair. And if somebody shows that he's wrong, fine. Rather than simply, I don't like him, I hate him, he's an evil conspiracy theory, just blah, 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 blah. The tautological attacks of simply saying he's something bad, therefore I like him. So my point being this: after watching the entire system attack or dismiss him for 3 years, and him failing at any time to wither, failing to stand in this headwind, and failing to snap or bend, I have to say, I don't care what you say about this guy, but don't tell me he's some fake and phony who's just bending over for the system. Don't tell me that. Somebody else may believe it, but don't tell me that after the last 3 years. It is not logical. That's what I'll say. Why do I not believe that? It is not logical. It is not consistent with the facts that someone would go against the entire system on something that you absolutely weren't allowed to. And now he's a puppet for the entire system that's there to sheep us, dog us in, blah, 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 blah. It's not logical to me. You can believe it if you want to. Doesn't make sense to me. It's not a defense of him. It's not an attack on him. It's not even about him. It's about my view of what makes sense, of what position I'm taking and why I'm taking that position. Now, let us continue. So he goes in. So my point is, do I think he's some kind of puppet for the machine? Logically speaking, the history doesn't tell us that would be a reasonable position. Now, I will say this. So he decides, I'm going to run in the Democratic Party. I don't know why, but is it a stupid thing to do? Well, no, because one could say that that's political realism. One could say that if I run independent, if I run in another party, I'm going to have so much trouble getting ballot access. The system has set up so many hurdles that if you're not in one of the two parties, it's near impossible to win. So he may have weighed this and said, now, let me weigh these two things out. If in fact I run as an outsider, what are the odds that I can get? If I run as an independent, what are the odds that I can get on the ballot in all of these different states and blah, 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 versus what are the odds that I can win inside the Democratic Party? Either way, they're slim and fat. So if you choose either one of them, I can't push back on anybody. Everybody always says you should run as an independent or third party. Yes, I can agree with you that the two parties are totally and completely corrupt. There is a problem in the US, though, and that is they have so restricted ballot access that they've just about closed the door on that. So if somebody decides I'm going to go with one of the two parties, I hate both parties. I think they're cults and your odds are nil. But I put it like this. I always look at it like this. Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Spock, right? And this is the way it went. All right, Spock, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hide behind this planet, and we're going to get into the planet's, we're going to circle the planet at warp speed, at which point we will mathematically figure out how we need to accelerate out of the planet's gravity, which will whip us into light speed, and we'll get away from whoever the hell, right? The evil guys that are going to kill us. And of course, Spock would say, but Captain Kirk, according to my calculations, that plan only has an 11.632% chance of working. And the captain would say, you got a better plan, Spock? And Spock would say, Scotty, head for the planet. All engines for all, all at the helm. He'd say to Sulu, whoever's the helm, all engines forward, head for the planet. And here's what he knew. I have a better plan. 11.6% is better than 0%, right? If you look and somebody says, what are the odds of me getting on all the ballots as a third party? Nil. And they may actually do an investigation into that. There's a way you could look at that. You could go state by state and see how you do it and you could probably literally calculate the odds. In fact, my sister, being the mathematical genius that she is and a CPA, I guarantee she could calculate the damn odds, but I couldn't. I wouldn't even want to try. But I'm sure you could calculate the odds and give yourself the percentage, right? You couldn't necessarily do that with the Democratic Party, but if you look at it and it's like, okay, what are the odds of us getting on the ballots of all 50 states? 0.347%. Uh-oh, I'm going to run as a Democrat or a Republican. I mean, it makes sense to me, right? So forget that. I'm not using that as a judgment for him because I can come up with a logical reason why the argument to run in one of the two parties as opposed to running as an independent makes sense. Based on empirical data, I can come up with a logical argument that says that makes sense. So I'm not going to down him for that because that would be some emotional thing. I don't like the Democrats. Nah, okay. So if your odds without the Democrats are running as a Democrat are 2.4% and running as an independent is 0.01%, then you take the better percentage. So it is what it is. I'm not here to make that judgment. I can see the argument. I can understand someone that says, I got no chance, Garland. If I said, why would you run as a Democrat? I have no chance as an independent. Look, here's 11 states right here. I can't even get on the ballot at all. Here's 11 states right here. I got to get 600,000 votes, and I got like 1 month to get them in, and they must all be handed on a Thursday, on the second Thursday of the sixth week of July. That's the kind of rules they have, basically, like count the jelly beans in a jar kind of rules to ensure that you can't get on the ballot in some states. So if somebody says it just don't make sense, I'd say, yeah, I understand that. Now, he runs as a Democrat. Well, now we run into a whole new set of problems, don't we? Now we get into the fact that he is running as a Democrat. You are now running in a party. And you are running in a party where you're saying everything that this party stands for, everything they're trying to do, everything they're trying to accomplish, everything that's near and dear to their heart, I oppose. You're running in a party where the entire infrastructure of the party, you're running in a party where the entire funding mechanism of the party hates your guts and sees you as an existential threat. A party that is entangled with the national security state that sees you as an existential threat, that's entangled with these giant corporations, and you've been fighting giant corporations for the last 30 years, right? So I ain't going to say it's impossible, but that's a tall hill to climb. And now here's what happens. This is where I'm going to get to the meat of something. He's a smart guy. He's not an idiot. He's a smart guy, and he's not an emotional kind of guy like that. So he's going to go out and he's going to look at it, and he's going to know that there's certain areas that are third rails. And now he's got to make some discussions. Now, again, you got to weigh some things out, right? Over here, if I take this position, it's the thirdest of third rails in the party. And man, you think they're going ape shit now. Now they're going to go really bonkers. One of them, of course, is the Israel-Palestine issue. So my point being this, even if he has evolved to a point on the Israeli-Palestine issue where he's where he needs to be, he knows in this party that you get your throat cut for that. So he's got a number of issues. Now, I've read stuff that he said about the Ukraine conflict. Read his website and on, and heard him talk. And here's what I say. He knows the truth about the Ukraine conflict. How do I know he knows it? Because I've heard him say the truth about the Ukraine conflict. But he knows there are certain pro forma things that you have to say inside that party. And he's smart enough to know you got to say that. Well, again, you can argue that saying those things inside a party makes sense because you got to survive inside of this party, right? But then you go to, but it's wrong. And you're going to run away these people who are just waiting for you to do something to run them away. They're just waiting for you to do something so they can say, I told you, I knew you were going to turn out to be that abusive dad, or Bernie Sanders or Tulsi, or whoever you feel that you got burned by in the past. So when you do this for party survival, you also stumble yourself because you run away a bunch of people who say, I knew that some bitch was going to do it, right? That's the problem with running to, because let me put it like this. What he's basically doing is this. The Democratic Party, as is the Republican Party, but right now we'll talk about the Democratic Party, is a criminal organization. That's all it is. It's a corrupt criminal organization. RICO, that is racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization, right? That's what he's in. He's in a RICO group. So the bottom line is that how do you get that balance where you don't step on the third rails in the Democratic Party of Israel or whatever the hell, right? And when you're interviewed, you tell the truth about Ukraine. You say all the right things and you tell the truth. And then when you're dealing with the Democratic Party, you got to say something that is crap to kind of survive, so you don't step on too many third rails. Look, it's okay. I'll put it like this. He's already leaping on some third rails, right? When you say, hey, look, we got to stop this empire. We got to close these bases. The CIA's and FBI's up to no good. National security state's doing bad things. We're censoring that. We shouldn't do that. He's leaping. He's rolling on third rail after third rail after third rail. And at some point, you got to say to yourself, do I want to jump on every single third rail? No. I'm not going to jump on these third rails here, or here for whatever reasons. And therein lies the difficulty of running in the Democratic Party, or really either one of these parties, but in this party, because there are third rails that are just wrong. There are third rails that they have that are simply, they've decided as a party, they're taking a position, and those positions are manifestly immoral and unethical. And I'll put it like this. I've known plenty of people who, when they say about Israel, they say, well, let me tell you something. I don't like Hamas, but it's pro forma. I've got to say this before I say anything about Israel. Well, I don't like Hamas, but, well, I'm not supporting Hamas, but, well, Hamas is evil, but, well, I can't count this Hamas's attacks on Israel, but. And that is like, I've got to say these things pro forma. I've got to say this stuff before I say anything. Trump. You see that all the time. You see people that want to have an empirical discussion of Donald Trump. People who say, look, man, I want to talk about Trump and I'm going to give you my honest opinion, right? And they say, now, I'm not a Trump supporter. Don't like Trump. Can't stand him. But I think he's being treated wrong. Why do they start off with that? They do it as a defensive, because here's what happens. Well, I think Trump's being treated wrong. If the Democrats, this is the Democrats. Oh, you're a Trump-loving Trump supporter. If you're online, I think Trump's being treated. Oh, I knew Trump supporters like you, Lee. You're Trumpity Trump supporter. So to ward that off, they start off with, I don't like Trump, but I think he's being treated wrong, and I think this crap against him is illegal. Whatever, right? Israel. Well, I don't like Hamas. I oppose Hamas. Well, I think Israel has a right to do this. Well, blah, 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 blah. But, and then they go on. And as John Conyers, former John Conyers Jr., said to me personally, he said, Garland, I found that anytime somebody says but, it means ignore everything that I said before the word but, right? And that's what it is. It's just simply performative. And I think that's one of the things that he's doing, and running in the context of the Democratic Party. How are you going to run in that party and not do some of the pro forma stuff? I've jumped on 12 straight third rails, right? I've jumped on the COVID third rail. I've jumped on the Ukraine third rail. I've jumped on the NATO third rail. I've jumped on the, you name it, CIA and FBI third rail. I've jumped on the censorship third rail. And it's like, there's Israel. Oh man, I can't jump on another third rail. I'm going to just do the pro forma thing. What about Ukraine? Well, I've jumped on every third rail, but I'm going to do the pro forma thing. Well, I don't agree with Putin's invasion. In fact, somebody who I really know and think the world of, I disagree with him at times, Medea Benjamin. There's things I disagree with Medea. I know her, and she's a really sweet person. I really like Medea as a human being. We don't always agree, but I don't disagree with everything. I think it's good that Code Pink fights against the good anti-war fight, and they do a lot of anti-imperialism fight, and occasionally she takes positions that I disagree with. It's not, I'm not, there are a lot of people out here that if somebody takes a position they disagree with, then the person is evil, all incarnate completely. I'm not like that. I understand that I have beautiful people and friends that I love that at times I'm going to disagree with. In fact, as I've said, look, I've told stories like, I know people that won't even like, oh, you're a Trump supporter, I don't like you. I don't even care. I was in law enforcement for 20 some odd years. Most of the people that I work with were conservative, and I'm a far lefty. And a lot of them were my very best close friends that, I've been bowling with and fishing with and hanging out with, and I loved them, but we disagreed on politics. They were very conservative. So what I learned is over that career is, I was a lefty, I was a hippie, I was a do-gooder, I was write warnings, not tickets. I was looking out for people. I was like the cop that says, I'm here as a service to the people. Calls for service, not to go around mistreating people, right? So my position was, I'm not going to just say this is a terrible person because I have to agree with him on politics. And Medea did a tweet, and it was like, well, I disagree with Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but, and then she went on to say something else, right? And I felt like it's performative. Medea knows all she needs. You look at the articles she read, she knows all about this. She knows the truth. She knows that the neocons set this war up. She knows they invaded Ukraine. She knows that everything that needs to be known. And if you know all of those things, then what you know is this, that the Russians didn't want to invade Ukraine, that they did everything they could to avoid invading Ukraine, but that this conflict is not about Ukraine. It is about the neocons trying to maintain world domination and trying to spark a war between Ukraine and Russia so that they could then destroy Russia's economy, overthrow the government, and take Russia, and then go after China, take them apart, and dominate the world in the most evil way that imaginable to humankind. That's what that's about. Medea knows that. But, she also knows, okay, this is me. I have to performatively say this before, right? And I'm like, oh, God. I saw the tweet, and I'm like, oh, God, Medea, I just love you. But, oh, my God. Sometimes, when I see people do that, well, I don't agree with Hamas, but I don't agree with Putin's invasion, but I don't agree with this, but, and I know they know better. I just shake my head and say, hey, but I understand. Everybody's different. Now, everybody's not like me. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm good, bad, or indifferent. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I don't have enough sense. I think it's the whole Zen training thing. It's just that I don't think about any of this stuff. I act without thinking. That's Zen. But it's to learn already that you act without thinking, right? It's to learn that when you make a decision, you go through all of these things, all these machinations, you write down, you do all of this stuff, and in the end, you make a snap decision. So why not make the snap decision in the beginning when you realize you're going to do that eventually anyway, that you couldn't possibly imagine or come up with all the potential things that could go right or wrong based on your decision. Forget it. You have no idea what's going to happen next. So just make a snap decision and go with it, right? But not everybody's like that. No, not everybody sees the world like that. So bottom line is Medea decided that's the way she's going to do it. So be it. I'm not going to love Medea Benjamin any less. I'm just going to say, Medea, I wish you wouldn't do that. But it is what it is. That's who you are. You're doing what you should do based on the nature of being who you are. Again, what can I say? Well, I couldn't ask a person to do anything different. But again, it's that pro forma, that performative thing where you have to say, and people who are on this will probably listen and know people that does that. They will know of instances where people, before they say something, they say, now I don't like so and so, but, well, I'm not into so and so, but, well, I don't appreciate what he, well, I think he was wrong here, but, where they do these things to kind of defend themselves before, but to try to fend off an oncoming attack. And I think that's that. And I think that if you're running as a Democrat, that's where you end up, one way or the other. And how do you get around that? Because all you're going to do when you do that is piss off the people that love you and believe in you. But you got people that are already concerned and afraid and have been mistreated, lied to, misled, hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray. And they expect you to do the same thing. And all they're looking for is evidence that you're going to do it. As soon as you do one of those performative things, they're waiting to go, I knew it. Knew that some bitch was lying all the time. The boom, boom. I knew he was just like my daddy. And one of these days he was going to hit me. That's all they're doing. Daddy did it. Now I'm carrying it with me the rest of my life, right? So that's, I think, a big problem that RFK Jr. is facing. And now someone in there said he's going to make no difference. I disagree. Absolutely disagree with you there. I think there's an important, this is not about RFK Jr. This is about the dynamics of the election. Okay. So think of, here's the difference for starters. He as soon as he jumped in, he says, "Hey, I'm running." And the Democrats said, "Oh, sweet Holy Mary, Jesus. We're not having any debates." Why? Because they know Biden. Well, first of all, he can't debate. But secondly, if he could, he couldn't debate this guy because he would be exposed. So immediately the Democratic Party was exposed in their corruption. Immediately, no debates, no debates, no debate. And how many people have just, so it's, and I think that's important. I think it's important, everything that happens, number one. Number two, in the context of the 2024 election, we got a couple of things going on now. Trump comes out first and Trump says, look, I'm sick of these neocons in the State Department, these neocons all over the place, and the CIA, and they're up to no good. The FBI's raising hell. We got to stop this stuff. Okay. RFK Jr. Hey, well, boy, look, CIA's hell and this war stuff is crap and blah, blah, blah. Now he's different from Trump because Trump is still an imperialist light. Trump is still an ideologue imperialist. So Trump is still going to go after Cuba and Nicaragua and China and Venezuela and any country that's socialist or communist because you got to hate the socialist or communist if you're a right-wing ideologue. So Trump, I still have major problems with him because he's still an imperialist, because he still thinks the United States has the right to go around the world and be in the moral arbiter of politics and say, this country's got an evil political system. This country has a good one. If you can't be half an imperialist, you can't be half a neocon. If you think that some country, that the U.S. has the right to hurt some countries, to do terrible things to some countries, to overthrow the governments of some countries, you're on the wrong side of the law. That's all I got to say. You're on the wrong side. So anyway, and of course, one thing Trump doesn't talk about at all is Israel, because nobody can be more of an Israeli puppet, shall we say, than Trump. Nobody could be more of a Zionist than Donald Trump. Joe Biden is not as big a Zionist as Donald Trump. And so, Trump is what he is. But he came out and said, look, NATO kind of stinks. CIA's crap. And we need to get out of this war. But he didn't say we should go to war against China or Iran. You see what I mean? He's still problematic. Now, we now have two people running. Now Cornel West comes in. Well, Cornel West's position is he's not going to be for war or anything like that. Cornel West, one thing I'll say about Cornel West, overall, if you listen to the guy, he's a nice person. It's hard to listen to Cornel West say we must take care of the poor. He's a very a guy who speaks a lot of religious stuff, and he says we need to take care of the poor. We need to help the less fortunate. It's hard to listen to that guy and say he's not a nice person. He's a nice person. You listen to him. He's a very bright person, a very nice person. So he's saying we need to stop this wars and blah, 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 blah. So think about this. We got three people running: Trump, RFK Jr., Cornel West, who are all going to say we need to stop these wars. We need to stop giving all of this money to the military industrial complex and bring some of it home and things of that nature. Of them, to me, Trump is the least of the three because he's still an imperialist in a lot of ways, and he's still an ideologue. So he is going to always try to overthrow the governments of countries who are left-wing or socialist. It's none of our damn business, but, the ideologues will do that. Bottom line is, Yes, he's important, because the more voices that say that, the more obvious it becomes. And here's what's becoming obvious: that there is a growing element in the United States that's had enough of that crap. There's a growing element in the United States, and I'm talking about in the electorate, that's looking at this saying that's not what we want anymore. We want to go in another direction, and our country is hurting, and we need to put money, put money in, into the country, into the people, into the infrastructure. We need science and technology. We need decent schools and decent roads and all the things that countries have that empires can't afford, because an empire spends all of its money on woogity war. And we don't want to be. So what people are saying, they don't realize it is, we don't really want an empire anymore. We're tired of empire. 850 bases, nah. And you can't be an empire unless you do what we're doing, unless you spend all of your money. And so the empire is crumbling. People are, maybe they may not know it. They may not say the empire is crumbling, but intuitively they can feel it crumbling. Intuitively they know it's crumbling. They just maybe can't put it into words. They just say, man, this country's going to shit. But the empire is crumbling is what they really mean when they say that. So yes, RFK is important. Trump is important. Cornel West is important. Every voice that comes out here that says this is a bad idea is important. One of them, it's not that none of them is important or one of them's not important. And the fact that you're going to win or not going to win, no, it's important that this discussion is had and this discussion gets out into the open. All righty. So now let me look. Super chats. John McCarthy, did you see Caleb Maupin's video defending Nick Brown and Cornel West? No, I didn't. I didn't. Did not. I like Nick Brown. I like Cornel West. I like those all of that, so I like Caleb Maupin. So, I don't know. I watch it when I get a chance. I was out, but it's not relevant. I mean, he's a person, and Caleb's a person. He has a right to his opinion, just like me. I love Caleb. He's a good friend. But he has a right to his opinion. But the dynamics, if me and you and Caleb all were swallowed up in a earthquake crack tomorrow, right, it wouldn't change the dynamics of this election. I was out walking my dog when Scott and Andre was on your show. It was amazing. If anybody out there is questioning who's winning this war, they needed to listen to you guys last night. Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot, Skeptic. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, man. Those guys cracked me up. Andre just cracks me up. He's hilarious to me. And Scott is just intense and passionate and really brilliant. So that's something that everybody should watch. That was a lot of fun. All right, let me look. Oh, no tips over on let me see if there's something. Let's see what we have. Even Garland went along with some of the COVID BS. I remember you saying you took COVID test. What a joke. Yeah, I took COVID test. Okay, well, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Taking a COVID test is somehow going along with the BS. Sometimes, let me say this. Sometimes we get a little too pure. You know what I mean? We get a little too pure. And for me to say, that because I took a COVID test, I went to, I don't know what, a useless eater who, has a lot of good, first of all, that's on Rock. For useless eater has a lot of good comments. So I'm not trying to belittle useless eater in any way, shape, or form. I certainly appreciate useless eaters, comment, but I think, well, let me say this, useless eater. I'm glad. Thank you for that comment. It's a good comment. It's a great comment because it gives me the opportunity to comment on it. So you're saying even Garland went along with some of the COVID BS. So I thought to myself, well, what was that? And he says, I remember you saying you took COVID tests. What a joke. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I know I took COVID tests. I know most of them came back negative. A couple of them came back positive. I know, let's just say, I was involved with horse pace, shall we say, the unmentionable. And, I guess I seem to have a successful outcome. So if you want to consider that going, and I don't know what you mean when I went along with some of the COVID stuff. I don't know if that's evil to take a COVID test. I don't know, whatever, I guess to some people, I was not even supposed to acknowledge that there was a possibility that such a thing as COVID could exist. I don't know. Personally, I think it exists. Personally, You need to look up Eco Health Alliance. That's all I'm saying. Look up Eco Health Alliance and look up a certain person whose name reminds with Smouchy, and look up his emails and see what you find. There'll be some very interesting information. So whatever. But just think about this. I think that's also a good comment for this reason. What happens if Garland ran for president? Hey, I'm running for president. What are you going to do? I'm going to, no wars. What about the American people? The money we're spending on these stinking bases should be spent on the American people. We need a new infrastructure. We need this. People need health care. We need to help. We need to help the poor. We need job training. People need to be able to go to college. All this stuff. We need science and technology. Blah 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 blah. Right? Okay. We need to make some changes for the better. And all this crap about running around the world overthrowing countries. Okay, great. I'm going to go along with Garland. Wait a minute. Did you take a COVID test one time? Well, yeah, I thought I had a lot of sneezing. And I thought, I vote for you. You took a COVID test. I knew you were a sellout, Garland. I should have known. You see what I mean? So no matter what, there will always be a person who will say, yeah, you're looking good, but you're not quite pure enough. You know the term I use, and it is important. It is important, useless eater, what you're saying there. Critical. I tell you why. Because it takes me to another thought, and that is this. Everybody should have a deal breaker. That may be yours. You may say, well, look, man, I don't care if I agree with you on every single issue. If you ever took a COVID test, that's a deal breaker, which is fine with me. If that's your deal breaker, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem I have now with politics is that people don't have deal breakers. You're like, hey, I'm voting for Biden. And I'm like, well, he's a warmonger. Well, fair enough. Yeah, I know, but I mean, nobody's perfect. Well, he's in overthrowing countries and starving people to death with sanctions and all kinds of horrible things like that. Yeah. That's okay, bad. But I got to admit, that's pretty terrible. But that's not. In other words, it ain't a deal breaker. People should have deal breakers. Everybody needs a deal breaker. Mine, the threshold for the deal breaker is going to be different. With some people, the threshold for the deal breaker may be, my daddy did this when I was young, and I suspect you're going to do it. The last candidate I did such, and I suspect you're going to be it. Some people may have deal breakers that aren't even real other than in their head. Other people, it may be, if you ever took a COVID test, I can't support you, right? But that's okay. As long as you have a deal breaker. It may be a logical deal breaker. It may not be logical. It may not even make sense to me. It may make all the sense in the world to you. But Useless Eater has deal breakers, and I think that's a positive thing. Useless Eater has reminded us they have a deal breaker. And in this instance, I took a COVID test. Nothing wrong with that. Good work, Useless Eater, for reminding us about deal breakers. Now, lastly, I'll say this. What do I think? If someone said to me, does RFK Jr. have a chance? I would have to say, in the Democratic Party, nobody has a chance. That door is slammed. I think he should run. I'm all for him running. It's going to be interesting watching the dynamics. There'll be put some pressure on him, make them, force them, put the pressure on them. And if they're going to cheat, make them cheat. Make them cheat. Fine. But do I think the Democratic Party now is simply an outreach program? It's a PR program for the national security state and for the corporations. That's all it is. So this is not a party. It's no longer a political party. In a political party, the people have some input. The electorate has none. And in the Republican Party, they may have a little more, but not much. We have two parties, two brainwashed cults. I'd like to say this. We got two brainwashed cults masquerading as parties. That's the way I see it. At any rate, thanks a lot. I think that's it for the super chats. I think that's it for everything. And thank you, Useless Eater, for a great comment. Certainly appreciate that. All right, everybody. I'm out of here. Gotta go watch a game tonight. Denver's playing Miami. I like sports. I like a lot of sports. I'm a football person. I like the Caps. Those are the Nationals. They're our local team in DC. But I like the Wizards, the Caps, the Nationals. You know what I mean? It's just like the local team. I enjoy watching sports. It gives me a nice break. I'm gonna watch the NBA game tonight. I'm watching all this stuff on training camps and all for the NFL. I love that. I enjoy that stuff. Something to get my mind away from all of this horrible stuff and allow me to, just kind of relax and be stupid for a while. And we all like to relax and be stupid for a while. That's why I like show. That's why I love comedies like, okay, here we go. You ready? Napoleon Dynamite. Who doesn't like Napoleon Dynamite, right? The Big Lebowski. There's something about Mary. I like those crazy. Anything with Leslie Nielsen? Anything with Leslie Nielsen, The Naked Gun, you name it, right? I love that kind of stuff. So at any rate, we all got something that we like. Let me just check one more time to make sure I haven't missed any super chats. No, I haven't. Last but not least, I'll say this. Don't forget, everybody, if you can afford it, Patreon, if you can do a Patreon monthly, that would be appreciated. Buy Me a Coffee is great. You can do the same kind of monthly that you do on Patreon now. You can do that monthly subscription on Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is like $5. Buy Garland a coffee. How many coffees do you want to buy? Very simple. If you can afford it, I certainly appreciate it. Or Patreon, if you can do that. I got my PayPal and I got my Cash App stuff is all scrolling across if you can do that. Last but not least, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. If they throw me off YouTube, which they may, you can go to Rockfin and you can just become a member. It costs nothing. You can see everything there, and it's a censorship free. So even if they kill this video because I said the wrong thing about COVID or whatever, you can go to Rockfin and watch the video. How awesome is that? With no advertisements. How awesome is that? If you choose and if you can afford it, you can become a subscriber on Rockfin for like $14.99 a month. Or a year is like 12 something a month because they knock off a couple of months. So if you can afford it, fine. If you can't, you can't. And just do me a favor, share this stuff, hit the like button and smash the like button, as Alex Christopher says, and share this stuff on all of your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. Peace. I'm out.